This week in gaming, Besiege has received a multiplayer update, the Atari Box pre-order campaign has been delayed, the Nintendo Switch has passed 10 million units sold worldwide, Okami has been released on PC, co-op in Hazelight's upcoming A Way Out will only require a single copy of the game, Ni no Kuni 2 has been delayed to March 23rd, a fresh trailer has been dropped for Ready Player One, will it be better than the book? All this and more on this week's episode. This is 1RBC Gaming Weekly. For our longtime viewers, we apologize for our absence. We've been hard at work at some stuff behind the scenes. Even though it's been a sort of slow news week, we've still got plenty to talk about. First off, if you're fond of siege engines, great news. Besiege has received an update that brings a multiplayer mode to the game. In case you're unfamiliar with it, Besiege is an engineering game that allows players to create siege engines. It calls for a fair amount of creativity on the player's part, and it's resulted in some pretty impressive player creations thanks to its open-ended nature and physics engine. I'll confess, I'm not particularly good at Besiege, but it brings me a certain primal joy to build things. It's a bit akin to building with Lego. Right now, the multiplayer facet of the game isn't quite complete. It's a little rough around the edges, lacks a server browser, and feels sort of chaotic in general. That said, it shows a lot of promise. At the moment, players can use this multiplayer mode to play custom levels together. The game's single-player campaign levels aren't quite available yet. If you've ever wanted to enjoy a demolition derby with friends using absurd wooden contraptions, you owe it to yourself to check out Besiege right now. It's available on Mac, Windows, and Linux. Night in the Woods, Weird Autumn Edition, was released this week. The game Night in the Woods was released much earlier this year and centers on college dropout Mae Borowski, who has returned to her hometown seeking to go back to her life as it was before. Much to her dismay, however, things in town have changed. Home's not the same anymore, and her friends have grown up. The game was a big hit on Kickstarter a while ago, and it's gotten great critical reception. This update to the game is free, and brings new areas to the town and some fresh story elements, along with new minigames, characters, and much more. It's being billed as a sort of director's cut of the game, which is pretty neat. Check it out if you're looking for a surprisingly cute, melancholic game about burning out and discovering that you can't really go home again. In-game releases this week, Gorgo came to Steam. It's a beautiful puzzler with fantastic hand-drawn art. From what I've heard, it has a very simple premise that centers around assembling pieces of art in order to solve puzzles. In practice, however, this game is more sophisticated than it sounds, without being too complicated. Everything is intuitive about its design, and the reviews have generally been positive, with a caveat. It seems a little too short for its price, lasting about 60 to 90 minutes depending on how clever you are. I've not yet played Gorgo, though I'd very much like to, and I can understand the trepidation about price, though I will say this. I'd much rather pay good money for a highly polished but brief experience than no money for lengthy mediocrity. It's why I'll pay to go to the movie theater for some films instead of waiting for them to hit Netflix. Well, I suppose that analogy doesn't quite work. Alright, let me put it this way. Interstellar was an experience that I'm not going to be able to have again. Why? Because I saw that beautiful movie in IMAX. I was willing to pay for the extra experience. While popping in the DVD at home wouldn't necessarily be a mediocre experience, it doesn't quite measure up to the premium one that I'd paid for previously. Have you played Gorgo, and if so, what do you think about it? Is it too short? Would you be willing to pay less money for the same experience, or do you think that there's a serious problem with the way that we value video games, and more games should adopt pricing like Gorgo? Hit us up on Twitter at OneRuleBeCool, and be sure to share your thoughts. Gorgo is now available for the Nintendo Switch, Windows, and iOS. Hot news for fans of incredibly emotional pixel art walking simulators. Finding Paradise by Kangao has been released on Steam at long last. Finding Paradise is a sort of follow-up to Gao's To the Moon, which was released all the way back in 2011. To the Moon has a lot of special meaning for me. It was one of the first games I reviewed as a game journalist, and it's a game that really struck a chord with me. It's one that made me think, wow, games as a medium really are something special for storytelling. To the Moon tells an emotional story about a pair of scientists who change memories for the elderly, fixing regrets and fulfilling dreams as a sort of palliative care. So as you're going through the game, you're taking steps to change the memories of the game's protagonist, Johnny. It's an exciting science fiction concept, and it's not the sort of story that you often see in sci-fi. There are no space wizards with laser swords, high-stakes chase scenes. When's the last time you enjoyed a video game set in the equivalent of a hospice? This week, Finding Paradise was released for Mac, Windows, and Linux. It's the second episode of the To the Moon series, but it's a standalone game, meaning that you don't need to have played the previous games or spin-offs in the series for it to make sense. This new game revolves around a patient named Colin, whose life has been split down the middle. His last wish is apparently self-contradictory. At least that's what the game's official description says. I haven't yet played Finding Paradise, but I'm really excited for it. I've been waiting 6 years. Thus far, the game's gotten incredibly positive reception from the players. Go check this one out if you're into emotional video games that lean more on the side of visual novels. Also, I feel that it's worth mentioning that A Bird Story serves as a sort of prequel to Finding Paradise. It's a very short experience about a boy befriending and rehabilitating an injured bird. It has no dialogue, but it does a great job telling its story through actions. Check these games out, folks. They're quietly brilliant. The First Class VR came to Steam this week, and I'm not totally sure of what to make of it. Apparently it's a virtual reality experience that chronicles the history of flight, starting from the mythical Icarus on forward to the Wright Flyer, the SpaceX Falcon 9 of today, and onwards to some wonderful, hopeful sci-fi future. Developed by the Beijing-based Zodiac Interactive, it's a game that draws inspiration from Cixin Liu's Hugo-winning novel, The Free Body Problem. Now, is the game any good? There's really not a whole lot of coverage of it. I've not tried it myself, so I'm not at liberty to say. That said, I do love the concept of using virtual reality to create interactive history, especially for something as exciting as flights. Have you tried the game, and if so, what do you think? Hit us up on Twitter at OneRuleBeCool and be sure to share your thoughts.
Earth is the cradle of human. 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 However, human can never live in cradle forever. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage. Rage against the dying of the light.
One of the finest 3D Zelda-like games of recent years, Okami, has been re-released on Xbox One, PS4, and PC. That is, if you consider recent years to be 10 years ago. I know, it's been a long time. Originally released on the PS2, Okami is an action-adventure game that draws heavily on Japanese folklore. Designed by the legendary Hideki Kamiya, it's been praised as the best Zelda game that doesn't involve Hyrule. The fantastic gameplay involves not only exploration, but beating monsters by painting over them. Not quite in Splatoon paintball style, however. This is more calligraphic. It's an odd choice for pulling off special moves, but it suits the game's stunning watercolor aesthetic, and it feels really cool to pull off. I confess I have not beaten Okami, but I'm very much in love with the game's bold art style, sense of humor, and thrilling gameplay. This HD version of the game introduces a few new features. Besides improved visuals, the cutscenes are now skippable at long last. Thus far, Okami HD is getting rave reviews, so check it out if you're looking for a beautiful, and notably Japanese, adventure. If you're looking for a good deal on some good games, DRM-free, GOG is holding their winter sale. A ton of great games are available for cheap, including Star Wars Force Unleashed 1 and 2, which have just come to GOG, or GOG, or Good Old Games, depending on what you prefer to call it. Additionally, a number of fresh games have come to the GOG Connect service. If you haven't heard of it, what you should know is that GOG Connect allows you to hook up your Steam account to your GOG and link games that you own there to your GOG account. The advantage of doing this is that you pretty much get an extra license for the games without paying anything extra. And the games there are DRM-free and come with neat little bonuses that aren't available on Steam. For many retro games, for instance, the GOG versions come with PDFs of the original manuals. A nice touch. Additionally, these games are DRM-free, meaning that you don't need an internet connection to play them once you've actually downloaded them. So, do you want to burn the games to a DVD, move into a bunker in the middle of the desert, and hide there until you've beaten the games off the grid? You can do that thanks to their lack of DRM. It can be a real lifesaver if you're on a throttled internet connection. There are quite a number of GOG Connect games this time around, and they include Rebel Galaxy, Sunless Sea, Tahira, Echoes of the Astral Empire, The Final Station, Limbo, Inside, and Homeworld Deserts of Karak. Pokemon Crystal is being re-released on the Nintendo eShop on January 26 for the 3DS. Originally released in 2001 for the Game Boy Color, Pokemon Crystal is a sort of spin-off of Gold and Silver. It introduced a few new mechanics, aesthetic elements, and for the first time in the Pokemon franchise, allowed players to choose a female avatar. It does not appear that Ryan Reynolds has anything to do with this game, however.
My name's Wade Watts. My dad picked that name because it sounded like a superhero's alter ego, like Peter Parker or Bruce Banner. But he died when I was a kid. My mom too.
This week, a fresh trailer was released for the upcoming Ready Player One, and it looks pretty solid. Now, in case you are unfamiliar with Ready Player One, what you should know is that it's a YA novel by Ernest Cline, set in a dystopic cyberpunk future in which people spend significant portions of their lives in virtual reality. The Oasis, a VR world, or more accurately, a virtual reality universe made up of many virtual worlds, is one in which people of the future work, learn, teach, and play. They enjoy the lives that they want in there. The book's protagonist, Wade Watts, is part of a massive treasure hunt inside the Oasis as he's searching for the answers to clues left behind by the founder of the Oasis. Whosoever solves all the clues wins the founder's fortune. Having read the book, I have to say that I love the story's premise, but I wasn't too thrilled about its execution. See, it's a story that's all about nostalgia for the 80s. It's through his extensive knowledge of retro games and old sci-fi and fantasy films and comics that the protagonist solves these puzzles, which is cool up to a point. I feel that the book's reliance on nostalgia sort of detracts from the story at some points. Like, have you ever had a friend who just would not shut up about a certain subject? Every single conversation bucks back around to it. That's the underlying problem with Ready Player One. It feels like nostalgia for the 80s overshadows plot, character development, and story, which is a pity because the concept is just so cool. That said, this trailer seems to include scenes that weren't in the book. There's a race happening which definitely wasn't in the source material, so perhaps under Spielberg's direction, some improvements have been made? Perhaps. We'll have to see when the movie comes out on March 30th, 2018.
To escape. But I found something much bigger than just myself. Are you willing to fight?
Help us save the Oasis.
If you're a Nintendo Switch owner and a fan of steampunk robots and turn-based strategy games, great news. SteamWorld Heist is coming to the Switch on December 28, 2017. This version of the game is the Ultimate Edition, which comes with all the game's previously released DLC. SteamWorld Heist is a post-apocalyptic steampunk game set in a future in which steam-powered robots sail across stars. You play as Captain Piper and take command of a crew of steam-powered pirate robots, embarking on heists and other adventures. The game features some very creative design and is well worth checking out. It's also available on Mac, Windows, Linux, 3DS, PS4, Wii U, Xbox One, Vita, and iOS. Finally, we leave you with a trailer for Mineko's Night Market, an upcoming adventure game about a girl who moves to an island that's overrun with cats. It looks absolutely adorable, and it's coming to Steam sometime in 2018. That's it for this week's game news. For all the greatest game news, reviews, interviews, and more, be sure to follow at OneRuleBeCool on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to follow me at Jordan_Cameron for my own views.